Okay, so hi guys. So today I'm going to show you how to set up Chakra UI in your Next.js application my way. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So to get started, you can head over to nextjs.org website and we are going to be installing Next.js and then later on installing Chakra UI. So let's get started. So we're going to be using the latest version. So that is Next.js 15 and using the app router. So you can head over to installation. And this is how we do the installation. So I'll just open up my terminal. So opening the terminal, we're going to follow the steps that have been highlighted by Next.js here. So I'll just zoom this in so that you can see, and then cd to a folder of my liking. You can just create your folder. Then we can do npx create -next-app latest. So we're going to do that, and I like using pnpm. So you can do something like use pnpm. But you don't have to use pnpm. You can leave it at here. So use pnpm. So I want to use pnpm, but if you want to use yarn, then you can use the flag use yarn. So this is called Next.js Chakra UI. Okay. So this is the project name. Would you like to use TypeScript? Yes. Would you like to use ESLint? Yes. Would you like to use Tailwind? No, because we are going to use Chakra UI for our styling. Would you like your code to be inside source directory? So here you can choose either yes or no if you'd like to have the source directory. Would you like to use the app router? Yes. TurboPack? No, because the compatibility between TurboPack and Chakra UI is not good. You'll see on the documentation for Chakra UI why you need to disable that. And then do you want to customize the import areas? No. So then now we wait for it to install the dependencies. Okay, so as it is installing, we can head over to Chakra UI. So you can head over to Chakra UI and then let me just go home so that you can see where you start from. So Chakra UI is a component system for building products with speed, accessible React components for building high quality web apps and design systems, which works with Next.js, React, server components. So we say you press the button start building, and then you select the framework, you select Next.js, and then we follow these prompts. So because I'm using pnpm, I'll need to use pnpm install instead of npm install. But if in case you just used npm, you can go ahead and use npm. So just copy that, go back to my terminal, everything is okay. Then I can cd to Next.js. Then I can open this in VS Code so that you can see the folder structure, etc. And then here is our app. So as you can see, this is a typical Next.js application. We have a favorite icon. We have global.css, layout, page module, page. So the first thing you always do is to run your website and see whether it's running. So you run that by using this command. So in case you're using npm, you'll say npm run dev. But when using pnpm, you say pnpm dev. Okay. And then we need to head over to this URL. So the URL is localhost 3000. So as our application is loading, we can continue to see. So the first thing we do is to install Chakra UI. Then the next thing we need to install are the snippets. So the snippets are small build components that help you build UI faster. So component like a button, we have a component like a dialog, we have a component like a drawer. Okay, so these components, I can show you the components. These are the components we are talking about: the accordion, the action bar, the alert, the avatars, the badge, the block quotes, etc. So you can see our application is running. So we can go back to our project, and the first thing we do is I'm not going to remove the favorite icon because you can add yours, but for today's tutorial you won't. So you highlight everything in the global.css and delete it. Go to the page.module and delete that file. Go to the page.tsx. So let me just make this one smaller. Okay, like that. And delete everything from the inside. And also delete the imports. You can go to the layout and move this. We can keep the fonts for now, but you can change the fonts later to your liking. And then we can start installing Chakra UI. So if we go back, you can copy this statement. So since I'm using pnpm, I'm going to can close the terminal or maybe open a new one, but I'm going to close. And then use pnpm to install Chakra UI. So it's telling me to install the dependencies again, no problem. Then wait for it to finish. Then we do our command again. So this command is going to install Chakra UI and then emotion/react. Okay, that's installed. So everything you always do, you make sure you follow the documentation. So you see I'm following the documentation step by step. The next thing I need to add is the snippets. As I said, the snippets are built-in. So the built-in pre-made components. So you see in the folder structure, we don't have anything called components, but if we add the snippets using the CLI that Chakra UI provides, you're going to see a components folder with some basic components in it. So now you can see inside this UI, we have pre-made components, a provider, then we have toast. This one is for toast notifications. We have a tooltip. Then later on, we'll install the button. Okay, so we can continue. I'm going to skip this process because I'm changing the TS config on Next.js. Next.js is the one that manages the TS config, so we don't want to change that. But all these would be good to add them. Some of them are there. Okay, then we go next to setting up the provider. So Chakra UI already provides a provider by default. So a provider is a wrapper, a context wrapper, which provides functionalities to all the other components. So we have a provider here for Chakra UI, but I don't like using the provider that is generated by the CLI because in case I make changes and lose my UI components, then I'm in huge trouble because if I make changes to this file and then rerun the CLI command, it will override what I have already done. So what I like doing is creating a providers file, and then I have provided a sample snippet in this gist for the providers. So I'm going to share the link in the description so you can just go and copy. It's quite similar to what Chakra UI has provided in their own provider, this one. They're quite similar, so they're quite similar, but I always like to have mine here to prevent it from colliding with what Chakra has provided. So another thing you'll see is that I have forced a theme. So you now, in case you want your application to be light mode by default, you don't want dark mode, you don't want toggle, you can use this prop called forced theme. But in case you want your app to be toggle, you can toggle. Then you don't need this to force any theme. You can remove this. But most of the time I like my apps to be just light mode instead of complicating most of the stuff, but still works. And then the next thing we need to do is to build the theme. So what I normally do is creating a theme folder, and then inside the theme folder I can have a file called index.js, and then I've also provided a sample theme from Chakra UI. So this is a beta tested theme, so you can just head over to the same gist and copy the theme from there. I'll just explain faster what is happening. So starting from version 3 of Chakra UI, they introduced something called a system. So essentially, the theme, by creating your own theme, you're basically creating your own system and giving it a config. So we do have a default config, which has the default settings. All these can be found at Chakra UI. Chakra UI, we have theme customizations. Let me just go real quick. You can see theming. You can see all that I'm saying here. So you have a system, and the system we have default config, and then you have a defined config. So the defined config, you define your configurations, and then because you don't want to repeat everything that is by default, so basically take what is by default and then give it your own config, which you defined using the defined config, and then Chakra will merge properties from the default config to your custom config to create a system, and that system is essentially your theme. Okay, so I'm not going exactly to explain what everything is doing, because you can go through the theming here and understand how the design tokens are working, the semantic tokens. You can see these are tokens, colors, and the syntax as well. But you can let me know if you'd like to tutorial on what is happening through the tokens as well, because so essentially this is how you extend the tokens. So these one tokens, and then you start with the colors. So my first color is a brand. So I have the brand dot background, I have a brand dot red, and then I have another color for primary, then I have a default color for the primary, and then there is a syntax that is normally used by people, whereby you have multiple colors. Okay, so that's color 100, color 200. You go adding them like that, and then that one becomes really nice. But in case you have just concrete colors, like maybe you have a red, you have a red and a specific blue, and then you don't want the shades for the colors, you can use this syntax. So in my components, if I need the color red for my brand, okay, so if I need the color red for my brand, I'll just say color equals brand.red, just like that. And in case I need a color for my primary, I don't need to do primary.default because this one is by default. In case you added the shades, you need to specify the shades as well. Okay. So if I wanted the shade for 100, I'll do primary.100. But in case I just say primary, it will pick the default by default. I hope you get that. All right. The next thing is something called the semantic tokens. So you can read more about the semantic tokens here. Basically, these tokens are what determine if you have a button and you say the button, the color palette for the button is blue, then the individual shades of the blue. So these are the semantic tokens for these. So these semantic tokens, if you have a semantic token, is where you specify what colors are applied where. So let's say you have a reddish color that is default to your company, or maybe blue. So when you say the color palette for a button is blue, then the semantic token is what defines at color blue, what are the colors. Okay. So let me just search here. There's a blog by Chakra about semantic tokens. I don't know whether they do that. So this is basically how you research and see. Semantic tokens are not very nice. So you see what I told you about the colors. So if you have your own brand color, you have the shades, you have these, you can add a default and then you can see the usage is brand.100, brand.200. But if you have a default value, you basically do BG brand and it will default to the default. Then you have the semantic tokens. So semantic tokens are mostly used for color palettes. So you can say all your inputs follow a specific color palette. And then the color palette is defined using these colors. So you can read more about the semantic tokens, but in case you guys would like to a tutorial on the same, yeah, you can just let me know. All right, let's continue. That was huge. So we have our theme, we have our providers. Now this one is a TypeScript issue, but it will go away. You can just do this and then grab that to draw the error. So we have our theme, we have our provider, which you should serve the whole application. The next thing is to go to the layout and then wrap our whole application with the provider. And note, we are picking the provider which is in our current folder, which is our provider that we provided. And we said the main reason of having the provider, this provider here, is because this UI is controlled by the CLI. So we might make changes here and then redo it and then take and override what we did in our own provider. Okay. So we go back to the documentation. I actually did this step. So you do the provider. So the suppress hydration warning, I'll show you why you need to add this. And then we do this one, optimize the bundle. So we go to the next.js.config. Okay. Next config. Basically paste that there. So I'm just following the docs. And then we are here. So this one helps remove this error. And then if you see hydration warnings, hydration failed because the initial server rendered HTML did not match the client. The issue is caused by how Next.js hydrates emotion CSS using the turbo mode. So you have to remove the turbo flag from your dev server. But remember, when you were setting up our project, we did not opt into turbo. So we basically don't have turbo. And then that's it. So to test out this, we can use the CLI to install a button. We don't actually need to install a button because it's already there. Yeah. Like the button is already there in the Chakra UI library. But other components, you'll need to install them, like drawers, all those stuff. So I can come here and say button. Import it from Chakra UI. And then run my dev environment server. So I'll go back and refresh. Hopefully we won't get any errors, but if we do, we are going to fix them as we go. So it's taking long to load. Let's see. It's compiling. Okay, it has compiled. Oh, I didn't give the button anything. So I can come here and say my button. You can see it there. So there's normally an error that is that comes up, a yellowish error, but I saw we did not see, and also Currently don't have a hydration warning. In case you see an error here saying that hydration did not blah blah blah, there is something you can come here and suppress hydration warning from Next.js. And that's it, guys. That's how you install Chakra UI in Next.js, and you can start building. So let's try one of the components. I don't know which component people would like. Which component? I don't want a heavy component. I just want a simple component. Which component should I use? Something like a switch. Let me try this. This one is too much code. I don't know. Let's try a simpler component, the accordion. So basically how you add a component is you come here and say npx Chakra UI /li snippet add accordion. I don't know whether the accordion is spelled like that. Yes, double A, double. Let's see how that will work. I don't know. Let's see how that will work. Yeah, it does work. So you can come here. I don't think the accordion needs to be installed. I think an accordion is built in. I'm looking for a component that is not built in. Let's try something like a drawer as well. Or a dialogue. Let's try something like a dialogue. Some of these, and I'm not seeing the instructions to install them. Drawer. I think also the drawer you don't need to install. So most of these components you don't need to install them. This is the action bar. I think most of these you don't need to install them. So this is a demo. Let me try this and see. Let me just add it here. Let's see whether this one will work. We go to the page and add our action. So that's our demo. So we start our dev environment again. So let's see whether the action bar will be there, or else we'll need to add something. So the action bar is actually showing. So most of these components you don't need to install, but if you do find a component that you'll need to install, the syntax is always given by default by Chakra. I don't remember which our components needs to be installed. Okay, so all right, guys, that's it from me, and you can subscribe to this channel to get more updates. Thank you.